There are people doing things that are helping to turn cogs and wheels that bring the train forward in ways that some people will never even know what's going on.
Welcome back to Beyond the Chair, which is a series that the Founders Chair has started to get to know a little bit more about our founders and now funders post-event from the both literal and metaphorical chair that they sit in. So today I am joined with TFC's founder, James Wong, and a Greenwich funder, Laura Dinan-Haber, who is going to be discussing a little bit about her journey joining us at TFC and what's kind of happened since then, what we can expect to happen in the future, and just kind of get to know a little bit more about the ins and outs of investment opportunities and mentorship opportunities. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in and get to know Laura a little bit. Laura, let's kind of start at the beginning. Introduce yourself, excuse me. Tell me a little bit about you, your journey, your current role, and we'll kind of kickstart with that and kind of go from there.
I love it. Paige, James, thanks so much for having me today. My name is Laura Dinan-Haber, AVP Innovation at Nassau Financial Group. And I like to say that, I sit at the intersection of insurance, innovation, and ecosystem building. So my background's not a traditional investor path. I've spent the majority of the career as, I'd say, an operator, building platforms, brands, and communities that kind of bring people together where the industry is going. So at Nassau, I lead our innovation program called Nassau Reimagine, which actually started as an incubator back in 2019. It's involved into a broader strategy that now includes the capital deployment aspect. So over the last several years, I've had the opportunity to work with over 100 startups, helping them navigate the insurance landscape, make the right connections, understand how to actually work with carriers. I think that that's part of our conversation that we'll get into today is what makes something unique. And I think working with carriers and having the ability to identify not only a problem, but also identify a solution and then kind of build that relationship is something that can be tricky for sometimes. But that's the proximity that kind of naturally led into the deeper role of the investment piece. Because as you start to see, it's not just what's interesting, but it's what's viable and also what's valuable. So I'm excited. We started the 10 million commitment last April is when we announced it, and it's been just awesome in a number of ways, kind of meeting new people, going out, having opportunities like the Founders Chair, to not only see what the larger ecosystem and community is doing and the folks that they're bringing together, but also being able to make that impact through those kinds of investments and commitments.
Amazing. Thank you for that intro. It's really helpful. And I think to your point, there's definitely going to be some more layers we want to peel back along the rest of this discussion. I'm curious about the two of you. How did you guys get connected? I know, James, you seems like you know everyone in the industry, and Laura, having spoke ahead of this, there's a lot of like paths that cross, right? There's a lot of people know everyone, that kind of mentality. So can you guys talk about how you got connected and just kind of what kickstarted your journey with TFC in particular? That would be
I'm gonna
great.
let James
Laura,
run with this one. Yeah.
oh, you beat me to it. I was going to say this is a test because we may have different answers, and that's okay,
Ooh, I like
right?
that.
But what came to mind immediately was you were low key behind the scenes, but not because you were directing everything that's going on at the Medicarians side event, if you will. On It was retirement. What was a fancy term? It was retire tech. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And so I was on a panel, and Paul Tyler, our good friend, right, invited me to go and host a panel of BGIMO leaders. And here enters Laura into the discussion because she was my like resource and helpline and all the above on what do I need to know so that this panel does a great job. And then day of on site, she was just, my go-to person, to make sure that everything was done. But it was a really neat, really smooth event. And I want to say was it the first or second year of the Retire Tech piece?
Yeah, so that was our first, I'll say, large, nationwide piece of it. We had started Retire Tech 3 years previous, small in Hartford. Let's test out this concept. Then we brought it to New York City, and we partnered with Capgemini on that. And then we said, let's go big. So it was a call to our friend Jay Weintraub, and we just said, we have this great idea. Let's do it. And so James was one of the first phone calls when Paul Tyler and I were speaking about who can we put on stage to not just create content, but have a meaningful conversation in a way that's not only going to inspire and educate, but also showcase the work that's going on. And a lot of times behind the scenes, right? James, as you mentioned, there are people doing things that are helping to turn cogs and wheels that bring the train forward in ways that some people will never even know what's going on. But it's influential work that I think is pretty important and very interesting. So you are correct. I would have answered the same way. But Retire Tech down in Vegas a few years back was the first time we officially crossed paths. But I've certainly been keeping up with everything that James has been doing since.
And I'll give a bonus answer page too that you didn't ask, but what drew me to Laura and why it was so imperative that we got her to one of our TFC events was I recognized quickly that she really reads the room well, and she has so much exposure with her big role to people doing really neat things. But then she also could, I got this sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess you can diagnose if that's a founder that can get across the line, the idea, the execution, the vision, all the things that need to happen. And without even asking any questions, she would just observe, right? And then that's like, okay, we need that voice, not just for the other funders that she greatly benefited, their perspective on the groups that she saw in Greenwich, but also the founders there that are looking for, yes, capital, but more so also just good feedback from someone who cares, right? So that's what drew me, and I started tracking, your career and started understanding a little bit more of what you do, and it was like everything. You had your hand in a lot of different things, and it was really great because this founder community is it's broad, but it's tight knit for those building that things that are really changing or have aspirations to change. And so it would hit your desk at some point. And so it was really neat to say, okay, Laura, you can't go anywhere. This is our last of the year. You got to come out. We've made it just down the street for you in some cases. So yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You were pretty close proximity, weren't you?
Yes, yes. As a Connecticut native, it was quite convenient to go down to
Nice.
Greenwich. And it's funny, James, that you mentioned that. I am very much an observer, right? And then some people could think, well, she starts off as quiet, and then those who know me are listening, they're like, Laura's quiet. But when in circumstances like that, when you're watching a room and you're trying to understand. We actually, so bringing it back to an earlier part of the conversation, the difference between sales and marketing, right? If somebody's trying to get something across, they're gonna do it in a way for a sales perspective. I'm gonna tell you exactly how I want you to feel, what I want you to think, how I want you to walk away with, right? And I'm gonna be literal about it, and I'm gonna get you to agree with me is my goal. And then marketing is kind of doing it in different ways, but underlying all of that bits and pieces is just the human psychology. When you watch someone, how they interact with others, which way are their feet pointing? When they sit at a table, how close or how far are they? When they speak, are they speaking with conviction? What are their hands doing? Like, there's so many different signals you can receive from people without them knowing that they're giving them to you, and then starting to put together pieces of the puzzle. Because as you mentioned, the ecosystem is vast, but it's also very tight knit. Where if you want to know something about either it's a company, a funder, a founder, in many instances, it's one phone call or one text or one email away. It might take two, but never usually more than three. So that's the power I think that we have. And it's something that I think founders need to almost appreciate, understand, and respect in a way because great news travels fast, but all news, whether or not it's great, can even travel faster. So I think that the understanding of if I get a phone call from James and James says, hey, you need to meet with so and so, they're doing something that I think is going to be great, you're going to be interested. I'm going to take that call and I'm going to say, let's do it right now because I trust James and it's the relationship that we've built and the relationship that the Founders Chair brand has built in the larger ecosystem. Whereas if I were to receive a call from Paige and Paige is like, hey, by the way, I've heard XYZ, this has been my experience. I'm going to take that with as much weight as well. So it's one thing that I think was valuable for founders to understand is how connected funders can be and how connected corporates can be as well, because news travels fast in both directions. So I think that that's something that people should just be aware of.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's
it goes so far beyond just the pitch deck. Like you said, Paige, we've had conversations on some of the guests that came, and how did they react when they got a thank you card from us? Did they
Yeah.
throw it on the table or did they hold on to it, right? Even for the courtesy of throwing it away at the hotel, right? It's those little things that, or off camera when they're not on. Are they, we have a no jerk factor, And we don't want anyone to be jerks. And if they are, then guess what? They're going to treat our money that way, or they're going to treat
Mhm.
valuable relationships that way. So we kind of step back, now they could have had a bad day and we kind of give them more chances, right? Or her more chances, but that's a signal, right?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued around just the psychology around just business transactions in general. I think it's so fascinating, and it brings up a really good point because, we live in this very digital world, but James and I were actually just talking yesterday about the importance of, as we lean into AI driven tech, the importance of these in-person meetings and opportunities that can be presented. And body language is so, it is, you cannot, it doesn't compare to anything else. Like, you can be saying all the things you want, but you don't see what my feet are doing under the desk. You don't
Right.
see how, am I sweating? There's all those other
Right.
layers. In person, you can see that and you can feel that. So that kind of is a good segue into another question I have, which is, as you're kind of looking through this investment lens, what are you looking for first when you meet a company? Obviously, this like the energy that they bring to the room and their body language is important, but what are those other signals that matter most to you? And do you kind of have a specific like evaluation tool that you use, whether that's just in your head or literally on paper? Just walk us through kind of what goes on in your brain as you're sitting there vetting these companies that bring their idea to you.
Yeah. I would say, in one word, the first thing I look for is clarity. Do they have clarity around not only being able to articulate the problem that they're solving, but why does it matter? And why does it matter right now? I think it's the age-old question of, are you coming with a solution or are you coming with a problem you're looking to solve? And in some ways, we used to see a lot of like, hey, I built this. This is great. You need it. Well, what was the problem? Like, did you just build something because you wanted to build it and now you're trying to like jam this shape into like a square hole? Like maybe it'll get in there, but like, is it going to be the right fit? Was that even a problem? Like, did I see that as an issue? So I think for me, it's like clarity has got to be number one. Can you articulate exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why I should care about it? In many cases, you would think, well, like, of course they're going to come with that. Well, no, not every single time. And that's a signal too, right? And then you start to look to say, all right, well, are they early in their journey? Is this the first time that they are going forth with a project like this? Are they on a learning path, or are they kind of a repeat entrepreneur where they've had, X number of successes behind them? And then the questions in my mind start to change a little bit, where I start to understand, where are they on their path? What is their background? I mean, a lot of times, especially in, the 2019 when I was getting my feet wet and coming into the space initially, and for the record, I have a background in financial services and economic development. So for me, it's like I carry many different lenses, but it always comes back down to uh, the people, right? And it's the people who are sitting around the table. And in tech, when I was first getting exposed, especially, it was a lot of industry veterans. And they were coming forth with solutions because they had been in the industry for decades. They understood the problems because they were dealing with the problems and they were solving them in ways that they knew would be attractive to carriers, because in many cases they were coming from carriers and they were coming from leadership positions within carriers. So when those individuals would come in and perform, if you will, right, give their pitch, they were speaking in a language that was immediately understood. They were very clear. They were articulating the pain points, kind of getting to the points where they knew that the questions were going to be asked right at the upfront. So that way the discussion could then focus on, well, wait, how would we embed this? How would this work? And it would get farther down the path simply because they jumped those hurdles very early in the beginning. But again, it comes down to, what is their background? What is their understanding? Have they done the homework when they meet with a Laura or a James? What are we up to? Do you know what we're interested in? Have you looked to see what we've potentially invested in, or what we're engaging in? How much do you know about us and our style? So when you come to sit down to present, you're doing it in a way that's going to be immediately receivable to the audience you're sitting in front of. So for me, it's clarity, but James, I'm going to flip the question on you. When you have the opportunity for somebody to come in and share what they're up to, what's one of the first things you look for?
So thanks for flipping it on me because I was actually going to do a follow-up. I'll get to that later though. Um,
I love
you know
this.
what's interesting, Laura? And I'm not a trained investor, right? I just have gone through a lot of pain myself and had to do workarounds or build something myself to then solve that issue. And so I always come in with not really sizing them up. I want to understand what they're talking about. Because I think, like you said, clarity is really important. I don't get a lot of that because we're early stage. sometimes too early for some of those, that invest $7 to $10 million check, or $2 million check. We're looking at opportunities, where $150,000 would be a world of difference for that founder, right? So I go in not necessarily thinking about what are they trying to solve, but just trying to learn from nothing, a blank canvas, right? Now, I think as I've gotten further along in our journey at TFC, being 2.5 years old, I'm starting to be a little bit more disciplined in how I do that because I can't give that time to everybody.
Hmm.
So I think I'll get to that spot. But currently, I just go in and I listen and learn. And it comes back to, do I believe this person is credible, right? Credible in what they're saying they're doing to what actually is being presented, what they're saying they're solving to, is it really solving it? And then the biggest question is, would an agent, agency, carrier, would they pay for that, right? And sometimes it's filling in this massive gap because they didn't say it because they're early stage. But I know a carrier will not react to. Remember the days where I'm going to give a carrier, oh my gosh, you've got to give me the top contract. I'm going to give you $1 billion of annuity business, right? That scares them because the first question now is, how are you going to get that billion? Are you going
Hmm.
to trade paint with your competitors and just steal agents? Or are you building something brand new that brings in an uninterested party into the business? Well, that's highly attractive, right? But the days of throwing out the biggest number is not where it hits the carrier, right? So have they missed the opportunity to sell this solution in a good way? Well, that's really exciting for the folks like you and other funders because they see that as opportunity. You
Hmm.
know, they've got a great solution, but they may have missed the go-to-market strategy and the ways to kind of message and position their people. So I have maybe more of a blank canvas perspective, but it starts to narrow that focus. As you said, I loved it. When you hear that they're second time, third time founder, your questions change, your expectations change. And so it's always kind of, iterating on whoever you're sitting in front of or that you're on the Zoom call with. But yeah, I give maybe space for first 5 minutes of what are we even talking about? Right. And then I start to formulate where I go from there. And again, it's they got to be reasonable. They have to have a problem, and that problem has to be, someone who wants to pay for that problem to be solved. Those are the
Hmm.
three things. So yeah, but to get to those, I just sit back and just let them go.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So my follow-up though, Laura,
I was gonna
is
say,
not
yeah, I
all
think
the
you got a
time.
follow up.
Yeah, not all the time do you get to meet people in person or even by phone. Sometimes these opportunities come to your inbox. So it's very interesting. We had a conversation about that, Gretchen. How do you sift through so many opportunities? What are some ways to go through? And I'm not trying to give away the algorithm, but in some regard, our job at Founders Share is to equip and prepare these founders for the discussions to have with our angel investors, but also the
Hmm.
institutional investors that may care about this. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's one that it almost depends on what season I'm in, right? If it's conference season and I'm getting a
mm,
ton of inbounds because they can see, like for example, Paige and I were talking about InsurTech New York, and they have their conference in late March, and there's opportunity there. So I'm getting a lot more inbounds right now because I'm listed on the website. I'll be speaking at the event. I'm looking forward to seeing what Tony and David and his group are up to. So it's like they come in fast and furious, and it's almost like they're all following the same outline. It's like, dear, usually get my name right. Same message, copy paste. Here's some links that, my tech team would kill me if I actually clicked on. And then it's like, let's connect at the conference. Like,
uh,
okay, solid C plus. I appreciate the outreach. Like you're doing that one step that others haven't been doing. So you get credit in my book there. But like, let's take it a step farther. Let's take it a step to the people who are reaching out then also on LinkedIn. And they're saying, oh, I've seen fill in the blank about something I posted about recently. Okay, so now they're showing me that they looked at my profile. It's kind of like when you're teaching students how to apply for a job and you're like, if they're publicly traded, go see what their stock is doing today, and then you can talk about that. Same thing, right? If you're publicly traded on LinkedIn, go see what the person's up to. Make your message personalized to them in some way that's relevant, and then make that ask there. So I'll give additional, I'll say, eyeballs to the people who are making it a little bit more personal. But my favorite inbounds are short, sweet, and to the point. Like, tell me how you found me, why I should, set 15, 20 minutes of my time to speak with you. It's not that I'm better than anyone or too busy for anyone. It's you have to tell me why these 15 minutes matter. Don't ask me for an hour. I want to date you before I marry you. But if you can tell me 15 minutes, here's why, here's two options or three options for how we can get this done. I am so much quicker to respond to you. I'll be like, yep, 15 minutes on Zoom. Here's my Calendly link. Click and register. Let's do this thing. Or the other one that's a little tricky sometimes is, going back to conference season since we're coming up on it. In the apps, only doing in-app messaging. Some people are great at that. I'm terrible at it. So like seek people out on the floor. If you are a founder and you want to engage, find them on the floor. Like don't be weird about it, but just say, "Hey, I'd love, do you have 15 minutes right now? Otherwise, here's my email, let's connect." Like be direct. If you send me a commercial, the odds that I'm going to watch your commercial or listen or read your, four paragraph email are probably pretty low. But if you can be very quick, very direct, or creative on top of it, I'm going to be much quicker to respond to you. So for me, those are the things that kind of stand out. And then also remember the power of the subject line. If you can catch me in the subject line, I'm going to open your email. If it's like, learn how my solution can save you time, it's like, meh, delete. So I don't know. I would say be creative, but be thoughtful and keep it tight.
I think that is such a good point because again, kind of going back to like the automated world that we live in, with our clients, we're constantly trying to, you need to be different, you need to stand
Yeah.
out because you can tell even a lot of these things are like they have like the canned forwarding response where it's like someone forwarded me, they found you on LinkedIn and they forwarded me I'm like, I know now that that is a really well thought out workflow that you have in your
Yeah.
email automation system. So to be able to find something like truly personal, but have that like very creative spin on it, and especially if you, I mean, if you do your homework and you get to know, like I learned that you are a very like down to earth type of individual, someone who would respect having like a creative something that's going to stand out in your inbox type of message. Doing that homework is so critical. And I mean that I'm biased in like the branding world, right? So from your personal brand, your tone of voice, everything that you're doing, like being genuine to that and making sure you're following through, like people can smell BS from a mile away. So
Yeah.
I think that in today's world, it's more important than ever to be unique and very authentic in your messaging. And I appreciate you kind of putting a stamp of approval on that because obviously, if you're getting hammered by all these emails, that is, you're walking the walk, right? We can actually see that as a real life example. So I appreciate that very, very much. And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I was out at dinner last night with an investor and someone in the business development world. And we're talking about AI and the use of AI for communication. And this investor gave a story about how they knew that AI was 100% used. They knew the heart wasn't there in the messaging and it just didn't hit right. So then it became a little bit deeper to say, okay, so if we know we don't want 100% of AI messaging or really well thought out automated workflows within, CRM or email systems, then what are we okay with? And I think this is more of like a larger societal question. And I feel as though the answer is going to differ and vary based on what we're trying to do with it. Because I'm pro AI. Like I am for using it as a tool in the appropriate way for the appropriate things, and using it in a way that's safe and smart, etc. But we've all known, for example, like M dashes. When we all see M dash, nobody knew what they were called. English majors knew what they were called 6 months ago. Nobody else knew what they were called 6 months ago. Now we all see them and we're like, oh, that's AI. Or the emojis are like, that's AI. I think we're going to get to an interesting point where, for me anyway, I've been thinking more about it to say, am I more likely, less likely, or neutral to engage in inbound content that I can tell is 100% AI? And it's a thought process, right? Around, Paige, to your point, around brand perspective. Who am I? How do I want to show up as a person, as a brand? And what am I comfortable with? And where am I going to hold my ground? Because I think, are going to be some people who will be pro AI and they'll be like, great, this is great, great message. I'm going to meet with you. This is going to be great. Other people might be like, it's automated. I'm not going to waste time. We'll see if they try on round number two. But that's just something that came up last night that I've been having stronger feelings about. But James, I'm curious because Paige mentioned her branding background. How are you vibing with AI right now? Does it read in a
Yeah,
certain way to you?
you've hit a tension point that is very relevant because over the weekend I went to update my messy middle article, which is talking about the journey for a founder who started to get some early traction. Maybe they're really close clients of theirs that became a client of their new company, right? And now they're sitting back saying, "Do I take on financing outside from away from friends and family, but someone outside?" and really scale this thing out? Or do I quietly continue to build? Right? That's always been a question that comes up during our founders chair candidate, process. James, what should I take on? Should I take on too much? It's really an interesting conversation. I call it the messy middle, right? When I went to go update it, it was very interesting, Laura, because I have trained some of my, Claude and Chat GPT on my style, but I had some really strong opinions, right? Um, but I wondered if I just wrote it myself, does that stand out, right? Maybe it does, right? But what am I missing? And
Right.
so I looked at it, punched it in there, and it came out with yes, my strong opinions, and brought some color to it, which is great, but also brought two other ideas to mind. And I really paused and I said, well, is this okay? You know? And so I thought about it and I said, you know what? If I could be a resource to folks who are reading it, who has a billion and one things to do, but they go, okay, James is going to bring what his perspective is, sprinkled in with stories and experiences that are unique to him, right? It doesn't matter if it's AI generated or not. It's going to bring forth a perspective that they may value, and it's going to be done succinctly. I don't have to spend 15 hours on Claude, use up all my tokens, and then realize, okay, it's the same thing. So there's value there. So that's kind of where I landed. Mind you, I'm 24 hours into just kind of thinking through that part.
Yeah.
But it's really important because I don't want to be perceived. I don't think anyone in the thought leadership or professional world with deep experience like us want to ever be perceived as we're just, on autopilot, letting AI do our job, right? And I think that's a concern that I would say shouldn't exist. I think it may be a little bit more perceived than it is real for this time, right? Because we all came from a world prior to AI. So we all
Mhm.
have a foundation of understanding. Now we take that foundation, amplify it with all the other things that I can learn, and then apply that experience to what AI is saying could be a challenge, and then come out to the other side of something that's valuable for anyone reading it. My concern is now I look at my 11-year-old and 8-year-old, they're not approaching their own understanding and foundation where they're
Mm.
going straight to AI potentially if mom and dad are around and they can do it, right? They're going to say, what is this? And they're asking AI how to do something or what it is. And that's their foundational learning right there. So it's a different perspective. So I think I'm still kind of working through that part, but I think there's tremendous value. I openly say AI has gone really good and sometimes gets me 90, 95% of the way there. You still need to bring in that 5 to 10%. Um, and it was evidenced by go straight to a technical role like engineering. Some of the founders I talked to about what are they doing with OpenClaw? What's your OpenClaw strategy, right? Uh, they said we're getting rid of the lower tier engineering,
Mm.
hiring another senior engineer though. So that therein lies the piece where it's okay. Let's embrace AI for what it is, but still have that role still colored and driven by someone who understands what they're trying to really architect and what they're trying to do. So did
Yeah,
that
I
answer
love
the
that.
question a little bit? I would have loved to join you last night to jump
We'll
into the
invite you
throes of
next
that
time.
conversation.
We'll
Yeah, I
get we'll
know,
get you
I
down
know.
to the
It
Haven for some pizza.
would love to. Yes, but it's an interesting world we're living in. I don't think anyone's figured it out, but I will say this as a caution: don't not use AI. I love that grammar, by the way. Don't not use AI.
Double negative is
M dash.
Yeah,
needed.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's a
Laura, are
resource.
you
It's a resource there that didn't exist a while ago, and I think it's smart to at least get familiar with it.
Mhm.
all I can think, I have to say this is you got me thinking, James. Have you guys seen Hitch? I know it's an older movie, but you know
Yeah.
when you go 90, I go 10. That's all I
Yeah,
can think of now, James, is like
I
you
like
and
that.
shake the
AI. Like,
keys. Yeah,
yeah. So silly.
It's
It's
I think of it like the example I used last night was like a calculator. I remember sitting in college getting all frustrated with my math professor. It's like you need to learn how to do this longhand. It's like, why do you need to learn how to do
wow.
this longhand? You learn the longhand at the end of it. They're like, well, here's your calculator, and if you type these things in, you got it. And it's like, to your point, the foundational knowledge to understand what goes into it. Whereas now AI is the calculator. Like if you have to take your foundational knowledge, put it into the tool, and the tool gives you an output. But for the 8 and 11-year-old, you're right. If they don't have the foundational knowledge, it's just an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah,
yeah.
very crazy. Now, if I'm curious with you guys, like I know James, you and I spoke about this, outside of this conversation, but Laura, as we look at like putting yourself back in your seat in Greenwich, right? Looking at specifically the TFC founder lineup, AI has been a big component to, I would say, almost every single founder that comes across. Are you guys, what's your perspective when you're listening? Like, what are you looking for when they talk about AI? Are there certain pieces in that, sort of pitch, so to speak, that you're like, ugh, that's a red flag? Or just in general, kind of talk us through what you're looking at when it comes to AI when you're vetting founders.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it continues, we iterate on the response, right? There's certain things that are foundational. Like we work in an extremely regulated industry. So for us, there's, NAIC, the different, each individual state at this point is working and coming out with rules around this. So even that is kind of amorphous at this point, where we know that there are guardrails. We have to do things safe. We have to be conscientious. All of that is just ingrained in the work that we do regardless. But I think from a state level, and then from the larger industry level with NAIC, a little bit is kind of waiting to see what implications are coming downstream that could potentially impact our usage or how we're doing things, or maybe how we're not doing things. So I think that is a little bit of a caution that we are taking regardless of doing smart, safe business. But for me, what stands out is how much of the solution or the company is AI dependent. And how quick potentially could they be replaced by an embedded tool in a product I already use? So if they're coming to the table and they say, okay, well, I can take a bunch of investment prospectus and I can take all this information, I can synthesize it down to the output, not to make your decision for you, but to aid you in the decisioning process. If you were to tell me this about 2 years ago, I would have been like, that is amazing. Today I'd be like, yeah, but so can I. So it's again, it's kind of looking at what element or elements of the company are AI based, how much of that is dependent on that AI creating or performing that task, is the solution, and then how quickly are you potentially going to be replaced by another competitor or by something I'm already using, because AI embedded within tools it's happening, it's been happening for a number of years, and it's just changing so quickly that even when we see something that's super interesting, it's almost the question becomes, is it too soon to make a decision? Because the technology is moving so quickly that in 3 months, 6 months, is this going to even be a problem anymore? So it's just a strange time to be in, I think, in a lot of ways.